Did NBC's NBA tip-off live up to the hype? Plus, the Ravens locker room, no fun anymore. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Front Office Sports Today from FOS Studios here in New York City. I'm Baker Machado.
And I'm Renee Washington, and thanks so much for joining us as each and every weekday we chat the biggest stories in the business and culture of sports. We also have ESPN's Ryan Windhorst on later to talk all the NBA news stories he's following. But first, let's dive into the shoot-around.
Yeah, very busy show, Renee, but let's start in hockey, where the NHL has canceled a planned Olympic send-off event in February at UBS Arena that's home to the New York Islanders. Now, this was scheduled as a replacement for the upcoming 2026 All-Star Weekend. ESPN's Emily Kaplan says the league will instead hold their 2027 All-Star Weekend festivities at UBS Arena. The league decided to allow players time to focus on traveling to Milan for the upcoming Olympics, which will see the NHL pause its season to allow players to compete in the games, Renee, for the very first time in 12 years.
Yes, and after last year's success of the Four Nations replacing the All-Star Game, there was speculation around if we would see the NHL All-Star Game pivot for this upcoming 2026. So they launched back around the Olympics and the exciting announcement that the NHL was returning to the Olympics, this send-off event. We had no idea what it was going to look like, but the season's underway. We're still unsure about what the arena is going to look like for the Olympics. So the Olympics Committee has been under some scrutiny, but now also the NHL pulls the plug on what was supposed to be an exciting send-off event. We already knew that 2027 was going to be at UBS Arena, but now it seems they're scaling back and honestly changing up the plan for what the All-Star Game is going to look like. So a little bit of a surprise there.
All right, meanwhile, speaking of surprises, the Spanish soccer league, LaLiga, has canceled their planned regular season match in Miami between Barcelona and Villarreal. This after players from both clubs protested playing the December regular season game, which would have been the very first regular season match from a major European soccer league played in the U.S. Relevant Sports, the international soccer promoter, had been working with LaLiga for years to get a match in Miami, and it's unclear now if the group plans to attempt to move a different game now to that city this season.
What a quick turnaround. Another cancellation that we're hearing from a league, because it was back in August when they even announced officially that the game was going to be played in December in Miami. Then this past weekend, about 10 teams protested with that 15-second protest of standing on the field. The broadcast did not show it, but we got all the news and updates around it. And then come Tuesday, they make the decision to cancel altogether. Now, some players have actually come out frustrated in the clubs because they also said they were supposed to have a meeting prior to this cancellation news to talk about what the plan was, but instead they also pulled the plug on this event, and there's no real plan of what Villarreal is going to do in terms of making up that home game they were supposed to host in Miami. They're saying they're canceling it altogether. So questions regarding lack of involvement for the players and the clubs, but also how this is going to impact their schedule, their standings, other components, because they didn't even want the game in the first place.
Yeah,
well, now they wrap their head around the game, and then it's canceled.
Yeah, and by the way, LaLiga even released a statement saying that they're kind of sad about the missed economic opportunity from something like this, because they feel like they need to grow the sport like the NFL does with all their European games and Major League Baseball with their games in Japan, that LaLiga and these soccer clubs need these international games for the exposure. But if you have players and a lot of other people against it, I don't know what they do here.
That's been the problem, mixing up the tradition of playing at home in domestic cities versus how do you expand and do something new.
All right, well, during an appearance on the Today Show, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said WNBA players would get a big pay increase in their ongoing labor dispute with the league, but he pointed to, quote, absolute numbers as the growth measurement as opposed to share of revenue. Silver said, quote, I think share isn't the right way to look at it because there's so much more revenue in the NBA. I think you should look at absolute numbers in terms of what they're making. Well, that comment didn't sit very well with the WNBA Players Association, who tagged Silver on an Instagram story with the caption, don't want to share?
Baker, this was supposed to be an interview to generate excitement around the NBA's 80th season, especially with the new media deal with NBC. And leading up to the season opener Tuesday, instead the question came up around the WNBA. And Craig Melvin asked a fantastic question that needed to be asked regarding what the WNBA is going to do. Adam Silver did not hold back. He deserves to be questioned. He does oversee Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner. The NBA does own about 42% of the WNBA. So with all these CBA negotiations with the end of the month coming up so quickly for that deadline, that is still the big question. The players, as we saw from the exit interview for Nafisa Collier to all throughout, they've been adamant about wanting more revenue sharing because that 9% they're getting in comparison to what the NBA players get, around 50%, a massive gap. But I think Adam Silver may have spoken a bit too soon.
I think so too, and given the fact that our Annie Constable says that the highest max salary right now that's being offered is $850,000, players want a lot more than that. Yeah. Well, after 23 years, the NBA is back on NBC with all the nostalgic feels from the 90s. So how was the big premiere for NBC? Let's jump into that and so much more in today's main event. All right, let's bring in front office sports media and entertainment reporter Ryan Glasspiegel. So, Glass, in one word, how would you describe NBC's coverage last night?
I'll use the word big. You know, it's a short word, but it carries a large meaning. And, you know, you just got the sense that NBC wanted to show that this opening night, their return to the NBA after 23 years away was a big deal. And you could see that in the production. You could see that in bringing in Michael Jordan. You could see that in this opening sketch where they asked these players, hey, what are your memories of NBA on NBC? And Victor Wembanyama like just laughed. He wasn't alive the last time they had it on. And so then they bring it into this Mike Tirico monologue that reminded you of the days when Marv Albert used to introduce Bulls playoff games. And you're like, okay, this feels like a big deal.
Yeah, and I'm curious your thoughts, since we finally got to see, with all the new talent that they rolled out with NBC, former players and legends and Hall of Famers. What are your thoughts on the broadcast crews in terms of the pregame, halftime, postgame, but also the in-game broadcast of just how well they work together?
Yeah, I mean, with the studio show, they didn't get a ton of time to really show what they're capable of with like Maria Taylor, Carmelo Anthony, Vince Carter, and Tracy McGrady. It was on halftime, and it almost felt like those ESPN NBA finals where like Malika Andrews would tee up Stephen A. and Bob Myers and the other people in the studio, and they would get, you know, 2 sentences each. It's like, okay, back to the advertisements. But in this case, they were doing that Jordan segment. So it's very difficult to give the NBA studio show a grade based on what I saw. The announce team was interesting because, you know, Mike Tirico hadn't called an NBA game since he left ESPN for NBC in 2016. So almost a decade. It did not feel like someone was rusty with him calling the game. He was on it. He's on all the details. He knows all the right beats. It's a 3-man booth, and those are always tricky in the first place. So Tirico and Jamal Crawford and Reggie Miller still kind of gaining chemistry. It almost felt like a basketball team, like the Rockets, for example. You know, they're integrating new pieces. The offense, all of a sudden, they're just like throwing the ball out of bounds because someone didn't know where they were supposed to be. You know, that sounds like a little bit of an insult, but I think that they're still kind of feeling each other out, where Miller and Crawford are like, okay, is it your turn or is it my turn? And you can kind of see, okay, they'll get this together in the coming months.
It is the early part of the season for them, too.
Yeah, exactly. The other big thing, obviously, you mentioned Michael Jordan. We got his first real appearance on television in a long time, but NBC had sort of been touting him as a special correspondent in this taped interview with Mike Tirico. What are your thoughts on that, and is this going to be what we're going to see from MJ for the rest of its time on NBC?
It's interesting. So there's like a phrase in show business, always keep the people wanting more. And that was exactly what they did with Jordan. I mean, he tells this story about how he rented a Ryder Cup house. He hasn't picked up a basketball in years. And the homeowner is like, Michael, I need you to shoot a free throw.
So much pressure.
It's like the most nervous he's been in years. And of course, by his telling, he swished it. I mean, that story wasn't going to end any other way. And like pretty much if anybody else tells that story, like if they tried to get like LeBron to tell that story, I'd be like, who cares? Stop. No one does, whatever. But it's Jordan. And so it's like oddly captivating. And then, you know, but here's what they did. They teased next week that Jordan is going to talk about load management. You're like, oh, I'm going to have to see that. Like, because, you know, the story that he told yesterday, I don't think they were giving us the best material from his interview with Tirico. But they're going to milk that couple hours of footage for months. And, you know, we're going to get very used to the attire that they were wearing and that. And it's going to be like, okay, when are we going to get into talking about what's happened this season?
True.
Probably not until 2026, but
yeah. Well, as we wrap up, I'm curious with our first look at the ESPN, the Inside the NBA on ESPN, some different looks for that network as well. Who do you think is best positioned to have the strongest broadcast across all these new looks for the various networks?
Look, we got to see Amazon. They won't even I emailed them today, not to go into too much how the sausage is made. And I was like, okay, so who's your top team? And they're like, we don't have a top team. We're going to be rotating people. And I was like, well, who's going to call the conference finals then? I think I was going to trap them. I knew I was going to trap them. And they're like, we don't know yet because we don't have it till next year. So, I mean, they're going to have Ian Eagle is going to be their top announcer, and they're going to have Stan Van Gundy there. What we don't know is any of the other color commentators. Is it going to be a 2-man booth? Is it going to be a 3-man booth? I don't know. We're going to have to see how that goes. And, Amazon's NBC and Amazon's NFL studio coverage has been great, but we have no idea how, Taylor Rooks, Dirk Nowitzki, and Blake Griffin are going to look. I don't think they've got a super high bar to clear over NBC studio based on what we saw last night. Look, they'll get more time and maybe they'll be insightful, but we weren't given that opportunity to see that. And then, inside the NBA is great. So I don't know. I gave you a long-winded answer to say.
Well, all the more reason to have you back to get your updates on all of this. Ryan Glasspiegel, good stuff as always. And coming up next, everyone on the show, ESPN's Brian Windhorst previews the season for us. That's next. And welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today with Renee Washington and Baker Machado. Well, the 80th NBA season is officially here, and so many storylines as well, from LeBron and Giannis' future to international expansion to so many stars injured for the first part of the season. So there's nobody else we'd rather get into some of these headlines with than the great Brian Windhorst. He, of course, is ESPN's NBA writer and host of the Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective podcast. Brian, great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's first start with the tip-off. We had 2 great games, 4 great teams at the opener. Are these 4 maybe true contenders?
I think one stood out unlike the others, and that was the Lakers. And you have to acknowledge they didn't have LeBron James. So, but the other 3 teams sort of embody what has become really the order of the day, which is the depth that goes on. The top teams have so much depth. It's something that has really become a focal point because we're in an era where people are getting hurt. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's star players. And so these teams are really leaning into to depth. And the Lakers aren't quite there. Their depth, for various reasons, just isn't there. And while they did add some pieces to their roster, they were pieces that were sort of cast-offs from other places. And so I think the Lakers are a good team. I just think when you look at, the Thunder, for example, they were missing one of their core players, Jalen Williams, and they had a second-year guy, a guy named A.J. Mitchell, who, unless you are a Thunder fan, you probably don't even know who he was. Step up and score 16 points because they have focused so much on development with their depth. And he just signed a contract extension this offseason. Like, you look at the Thunder, for example, and you say, oh, yeah, what sort of business they do this offseason? Well, they signed Chet Holmgren, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Jalen Williams. Awesome work. And I agree. They're not going back to the finals without those 3 guys. But you want to know why a team might win on an average Tuesday throughout the course of the next 5 months? It's because they have players like A.J. Mitchell, who they drafted and they signed to a contract extension this offseason. The Lakers haven't been able to do that as well. I think if you look at their last 5 years of draft picks, they've only extended one of those players, which was a second-round pick, Max Christie, who they traded for Luka. So the depth on the Warriors, the depth on the Rockets, the depth on Oklahoma City shows that this is going to be a season where these top teams in the West are just so deep, and that's why they're going to be so hard to beat.
Well, Brian, let's stick with the Lakers because we are going to get the first full year of Luka with the Lakers. And aside from their loss, when you look at his 43-point near triple-double, with LeBron being out, I wonder if it gives them a chance to see what it looks like to continue to have Luka lead this team. But how do you think that LeBron and Luka will mesh together in this season in terms of their roles and identities?
Yeah, so for the first time, really in LeBron's 23-year career, you can say that he is not the primary focus of the franchise, nor is he the future of the franchise. And even when he was leaving teams, even when he was, going to free agency and he changed teams 3 different times, those teams still viewed him as the future of their franchise. He just elected to move elsewhere. And so the future of the Lakers franchise is really 2 people, Luka Doncic and Mark Walter, who in sometime in the next few months will take over as the owner of the team. Other than that, I don't know who's going to be involved with the Lakers or who will be with the Lakers in a couple of years. If you look at this team in particular, I believe 8 of their players can be free agents at the end of the season. Some of them have options. They might not all be free agents. So I don't even know how many of these players will be Lakers next year. I do know that with Luka, who extended his contract in the offseason, is committed to being the Lakers long term, and all of their decisions going forward will be based on supporting Luka. And so they're sort of in this in-between period. And in all honesty, I know that because they're the Lakers and because their fan base is so intense and because their history is so decorated, that the expectation is that the Lakers begin every season as a title favorite. The truth is, while this Lakers team can definitely achieve, especially if LeBron returns to health, I have no idea how many of these Lakers are even medium-term players for them. And they're in this period where they're about to flip their whole franchise around from the ownership suite on downward. And so they're in a big period of change, but they've got to play this season out and try to get the most out of what could be LeBron's last year. So it's an odd situation to be in. LeBron's never been in it. Certainly Luka's never been in it. The Lakers are in a situation that very few teams have ever been in, where they have an all-time great player that they've got to put their arm around and escort to the door while also building with their new franchise player. And this wasn't something that they had like a 3-year plan on. This fell out of the sky to them last year when they were in the middle of another project. So they are in an awkward spot. And I know I'm in Los Angeles right now. I spend a lot of time in Los Angeles. There's just this intense, interest from the Laker fan base, who is so big and so passionate. And they want to be like, are we going to win tonight's game? When I think that the Lakers project is really a much more multifaceted, longer term, unusual period that they're actually in here.
Brian, let's move out east. Obviously, it's not nearly as competitive as it is in the Western Conference. I mean, we've got 2 of the best teams in the East going head-to-head tonight in the Knicks and the Cavs. How would you sort of assess the Eastern Conference, and do you think the sort of questions about Giannis's future maybe will overshadow who could be dominant in the East?
It's possible. It depends, I think, on how the Bucks season goes. As we sit here on October 22nd, opening day in the NBA, I think about 4 players that I have a big question mark about, that I don't know what's going to be going on with them on April 15th. And I truly don't know. That's Kyrie Irving, who is coming back from an ACL. Is he going to be a real factor? I don't know. Jason Tatum. It's very unusual to expect a player to return from an Achilles tear, but he is younger and is showing promise. If he comes back to the Celtics, it's a game changer. I don't know. I don't know how he's going to be in 6 months. Giannis Antetokounmpo, is he going to be a Buck in April? I don't know. I know that he has said that he's going to play the year for Milwaukee, and he said he's going to reassess the situation in 6 to 7 months. But he was involved in the decision in a concept of being traded in August, and star players who want traded in August frequently, not all of the time, but frequently also want to be traded in January or February. And LeBron James, who we also don't know health-wise where he's going to be at the end of the season. And after his agent Rich Paul's comments to ESPN over the summer about where he's going to be, I don't know where he's going to be. So if you could tell me where those 4 guys are in April, I would have a lot better feel of how this season goes. But it definitely is a thing for the Knicks. The Knicks didn't have, when the Giannis conversation came up to them, they weren't holding a full deck. They were not permitted to trade their whole roster because of very arcane rules. Primarily, they are not permitted to trade Mikal Bridges right now. And frankly, it'll be very hard to construct a Giannis trade without putting Mikal Bridges in it. So if Giannis really wanted to be traded to the Knicks, what I would have said to him is, you should have brought that to the table in June, not in August. But I know why he didn't. He wanted to see what the Bucks did in the offseason. And the Bucks did make some major offseason moves, but he got to August and said, I still think I might want to be traded. So the Knicks, I want to be clear. It wasn't like the Knicks could have traded for him in August and said, no, we're fine with this team. They didn't have their full deck. But I also think they do like this team. They do think that this team, with this situation in the East, can get there. And they'll have a better feel for whether they like that team come the middle of the season at the trade deadline. And they'll have a better feel in Milwaukee about whether or not this is the time to do something with Giannis. As for the Cavs, there is only one NBA team this year that is in the second apron of restriction. And, the second apron for casual NBA fans is very frustrating because it's very complex. And there's nothing I can do. The name itself sucks. It's a horrible way to illustrate what it actually is. But what I do know about it is, so it's been around for 3 or 4 years now, and nobody likes being there. In fact, 3 teams were in the second apron last year. All 3 of them took action to get out of it. 2 years ago, there were 5 teams in the second apron, and 3 got out, and only one of them stayed because they were the Celtics. They won the title. Mm-hmm. The second was the Suns, who have arguably been the most questionably run team. No one's doing that. So the Cavs have now entered the zone that they cannot hang out in for a while. I realize they have a lot of players in their 20s who are signed to long-term contracts. They can't stay there. It's just, it tells us because of what happens, you can't stay there. So it is incumbent on them to take advantage of this situation and really deliver this year. Because once you enter the second apron, it is a tacit admission that you are going to contend immediately right now. And if not, you're going to have problems. So the Cavs, with the lay of the land, are, even though they've got a young team, are basically in a year where they have to deliver.
Very interesting. Well, as you touched on, Brian, so much unknown around, especially the superstars and where they will be even come trade deadline. But something we do know about the superstars, there's such a large group of superstars in the NBA that are international players.
Oh, true.
Coming into this season, the largest amount of international players we've seen across the league ever. And the big names, SGA, Luka, Jokic, Wemby, Giannis, they are international players that grew up watching the NBA. So as the league's trying to expand their global footprint, I'm curious your thoughts regarding how much having those international superstars will help continue to expand the NBA and reach the next generation of the future Wembys and Lukas and SGAs.
Yeah, so last year in the top 5, you put 5 players on your ballot for MVP. So really the top, and really, if you get to the top 5 in MVP, if you're on that list, to me, that's really the definition of being a superstar, is if you can be on the MVP ballot at all. Even if you get votes, you're kind of like a superstar. And last year we only had one, I think we only had one American on there, which is Jason Tatum. And this year Jason Tatum's not going to be on there. And very possible that this is Victor Wembanyama's year to move into that conversation. Hopefully he can stay healthy, because I think he's going to rise to that. And I'm someone who has spent a lot of time overseas covering international basketball. I'm very attuned to the international basketball scene, and I think it's very important to spread the NBA outside its borders. But I also think it is important for the NBA to remember that its core business is in the United States. And particularly the NBA has 2 new media partners this year, and they need to make sure those media partners are happy with what they have. And, it is a challenge for the NBA to be able to develop the next American stars. Durant, Curry, and LeBron have been worth uncountable amount to the league over the last 15 years and driven so much of their engagement. And while I totally believe that it is important to spread it outside the U.S., and I obviously the NBA itself is trying to expand, to Europe. At the end of the day, the core of the fans are in the United States, and it is a little bit concerning to me that Anthony Edwards isn't a bigger star, because I think Anthony Edwards should be a top 5 guy already in terms of popularity, and he's not quite there yet. And the guy is absolutely dynamic. He's absolutely his team has had success. They've reached the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row. He's got major marketing campaigns behind him. He plays in a small market, but that has not held players back. Giannis plays in a small market and is an international superstar. So, the NBA always has a revolving set of challenges and concerns, but the fact that its top players that are driving so much of it are all international players is both good and something that they need to worry about, because there's plenty of talent in America. They just haven't been able to deliver sort of that next generation that is going to engage the NBA's core audience.
Brian, I want to move to Adam Silver here for a moment, and I want to go on his comments that he talked about with the WNBA specifically, because he's been really talking about the collective bargaining agreement with the players and the union here. And I guess the big question is because the WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert reports to him, and that he's been sort of talking about these labor negotiations. To what extent maybe is Adam Silver maybe the shadow commissioner of the WNBA?
Well, he has been on the record as saying that he is not involved with the labor negotiations, unless you have an updated quote that I haven't seen.
No.
I think he has said, I will be there in the event that that's needed. And if you want to make the argument that it's going to be needed, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. WNBA has a couple of challenges. Number one, their ownership structure is very different from the NBA. Because I think what the WNBA players seem to want, and I'm not completely up to date to everything that's going on with the WNBA union, but what they seem to want is a structure that is similar to the NBA player structure, which is where they split the basketball-related income 50-50. But the WNBA structure is incredibly different. Primarily, the WNBA, the owners of the WNBA only owned 50% of the league. The other 50% of the league is held by private equity and by the league itself, the NBA. I don't know if you say the WNBA or the league itself. And so, therefore, the negotiations and the revenue sharing are more complicated. You also have something that the NBA doesn't have, which is potential rival leagues. You have Unrivaled, which is already operational, and you have the potential that other international leagues may start to rival the WNBA. For generations, decades, WNBA players have been allowed to play in those leagues. And the fact that their contracts allow them to play in those leagues is a tacit admission that they're not playing the players enough. The reason they allow them to do it is because if they were given the option to only play in one league, for many, many years, those players would not play in the WNBA. And I think, I can't remember if it was Diana Taurasi, I think, who one year was told by her overseas team that she needed to pick one league, and she picked the team because it was a no-brainer. I don't know this for sure, but I highly suspect that part of the negotiation the league is going to want to chop off those leagues. Okay? And so as we get into a position where the WNBA players may be entering a lockout or a holdout or whatever you want to call it, or a strike, those leagues are going to be there offering to pay them money. And the WNBA is going to want to kill off those leagues, I highly suspect. And so we're going to have a showdown here of the highest magnitude. At the end of it, when the dust clears, I can't predict how it's going to go. I think WNBA players are going to be making a lot more money than they did. I think their financial position is going to be vastly improved. And all of their lives will improve. All of their, everything's going to go with that. But to get to that, and how much that's going to improve, and all that stuff, we're going to have some blood, sweat, and tears. And this is a seminal moment for it. And I really can't. You really can't compare it to NBA lockouts of the past, because there were not these other leagues out there that existed. And what they want is a revenue sharing structure that they don't have right now. And the reason that they don't have the revenue sharing structure is because there wasn't enough revenue for decades where they could share it. Because if they did share it, there wouldn't have been money for the players, because it wouldn't have profitability. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. It's easy for me to say because it's not my day-to-day life. At the end of this, I think WNBA players are going to be happy. But it's going to be a struggle to get there. And I do think it's possible that the league and Adam Silver will have to take a role.
Yeah, I completely agree. A lot of great points you mentioned there, Brian. I want to shift as we get ready to wrap up in regards to tonight's excitement, of course, because we got to see NBC's broadcast with all they rolled out with the nostalgia. We get to see now what ESPN, what Prime, or what their broadcasts are going to look like, as well as just more teams making their season debut. What are you most looking forward to tonight in terms of how the league's going to continue this exciting opening week?
Well, I am excited about our new teammates here at ESPN, the Inside the NBA crew. I just have so much respect for them. They have driven the popularity and the growth of the sport for a long time. And so for them to be with us at ESPN is a great opportunity and a great thing that's going to add to our coverage. I'm just excited to be, involved with them. And I really do think that there are a lot of teams this year that are going to really excite their fan bases. The Thunder are a really good team, and it's hard to say that they shouldn't be the absolute favorite. But there's 6 to 8 teams who I think can really convince themselves that they would have a shot at beating the Thunder in 7. And let's remember that even though the Thunder are excellent, they had to win 2 Game 7s last year. This was not the 2001 Lakers or whatever, that went through with 1 loss. This was a team that was challenged. And whether it's Denver, whether it's, I think the Clippers are a team that is to be seriously considered. The Rockets are absolutely a team. In the East, as crazy as this is, the Philadelphia 76ers, as we sit here and record this on Wednesday afternoon, the 76ers are one of the healthiest contenders in the East. Will they be a healthy contender in 48 hours? I cannot guarantee that. But when you look at the Knicks and the Cavs have injuries to start the season. Obviously, 3 of the top teams in the East lost star players to Achilles tears. Joel Embiid is going to play tonight, and Paul George is not far behind. It's very possible. And so Philadelphia, they operate in a world with no expectation, but they could engage their fan base this year. The Garden last year in the playoffs was electric, and I think you're going to have so many electric nights in the Garden throughout this season. You have a legacy franchise like the Detroit Pistons. They have their most excitement. So one of the things that this era of more parity has brought, it may have not is engaged the casual fans as much, who love the dynasties, who loved when, it was LeBron and Steph going against each other, 4 straight years when you were getting 35, 40 million people watching finals games. I agree that, in a vacuum, maybe that would be better in the overall health of the league, but there are more markets that start this season excited about their teams than there have been in a long time. And people can parse that and look at the national television ratings and whatever. The league is healthier when more of the local markets are engaged. And I really do believe they're in that spot this year. And it could mean lower national television ratings because lower powerhouses, and the fact that, that your opening night was Houston versus Oklahoma City. It's not LA, San Francisco. They're not going to be the same. But I do think that the local markets being healthy is a good thing, and the changes that the league has made has driven that, and that's they've gotten what they've wanted.
Brian, really quickly, in a non-basketball related question, we were just reading in the New York Times about this harrowing flight that you were on that had an emergency landing in Omaha. Can you tell us anything about that? And thank goodness you're okay.
Oh, yeah. Thank goodness.
The situation that was weird was that there was a communication failure between the pilots and the flight attendants. And the flight attendants were trying to get the pilot's attention by pounding on the door, and the pilots thought that somebody was trying to break into the cockpit. So they declared an emergency, but didn't announce it to the passengers. And so even the flight attendants, we landed without any communication from the pilot. We just landed. And I knew we were making an emergency landing, and I could see as we were approaching the airport that there was emergency vehicles everywhere. And so my concern, having no information, was that the plane was under distress, even though there was it wasn't like there was any sounds or smoke or anything. And when we landed, we were surrounded by police. And so the thing about it is that they realized it was and then you're worried about, well, there was nobody having a medical emergency. I thought maybe the pilot was having a medical emergency. That was my guess when we landed. But then when we were approached by police, we were not approached by, EMS. I realized there was a police action. So now you're wondering, what's the police action? Whoa. So, and the whole thing was because of a lack of communication. The pilots couldn't communicate with the flight attendants with the pilots. Nobody was talking to us. And so, I'm somebody who goes from Omaha to LA, multiple times a month, probably 11 months a year. So if there was ever going to be drama on the LA to Omaha run, it only is right that I was on the flight when it happened. I do think because of no announcements and no, visual indications, and people were on their earphones, or they pulled their window shades down and didn't know that the plane was coming in for a landing until the gear dropped. I actually think that in this rare instant, the pilots and the flight attendants were actually more nervous and upset than the passengers
I
were.
can imagine.
But then when the danger was over, because we had landed, everything was fine, that's when the passengers got worried because they were approached by police. And so it was a series of events that was unusual. But at the end of the day, I really do think the pilots protected us. They followed a protocol to protect the passengers. And at the end, everybody was fine, and we all made it. We were 4 hours late, but we all made it. And so I look forward to going back on Friday and it to be a completely uneventful flight.
Yes, we're manifesting this for you, Brian.
All the more reason that we're happy to have you on the show with us, because what a chaotic flight. Hopefully it'll, my goodness.
ESPN's NBA writer and, of course, host of the Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective podcast. All right, thank you so much, Brian, and let's see what's bubbling over at the FOS water cooler. Well, Renee, after a surprise 1-5 start to the season, the Baltimore Ravens are officially grounded. The Baltimore Sun says the team removed all fun distractions from the locker room. That includes ping pong tables, a basketball hoop, and even video game consoles. The team reportedly did this to make the locker room more business-like, but it sounds pretty boring to me.
They've lost their video game privileges. It is wild because I remember in the offseason when they were announcing all these renovations and updates, from the pool to recovery to even players having access to recreational things like this. It was such an exciting story, but here we are after 4 losses in a row, a team that was at one point one of the highest scoring offenses, but giving up the most points defensively.
Right.
Their coaches said that is enough. So after a bye week, bye-bye to their games and recreation, because they need to mean business. Let's hope it means more wins for the Ravens.
Maybe, but you would think that the players want this to bond with each other. What are they going to do without the cornhole games?
Now they need to focus less on cornhole and video games and more on winning their own games.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this show. Renee and I are back for way more fun tomorrow. We'll see you later.